Hey everybody, Ray here, and today I want to showcase my Storm Call Hierophant Build. Lightning goes blur, and the build also has potential for overlapping for single target damage, which makes it a pretty strong bosser. And it could be a pretty alright mapper as well, because of the huge amount of AoE that can literally cover the whole screen. It just looks fun. Let's go and look further into it. So talking about how it works. The build mostly based on the interaction between Awakened Spell Cascade that can create a lot of additional Storm Calls around you, together with Dorian's prototype that will be able to lower the resistances of the enemies around you. To be exactly precise, it will give nearby enemies the same light resistance that you have, since you can lower your resistances to minus big numbers like minus 160, minus 170, and numbers like that. It works pretty well. So for mapping, we are using a lot of Awakened Spell Cascade shots to just clear. And we need a lot of AoE to clear better. So for the bosses, on the other hand, we are going to use Concentrated Effect to make sure that whole zone of Storm Calls will be so small, they will pretty much overlap on top of each other. So when we're attacking the boss, we need to move the zone that way, so we will overlap the boss with a lot of casts of Storm Calls that we will get from Awakened Spell Cascade. To make the overlaps consistent, it's pretty important to lower our AoE. Not make it higher, but make it smaller instead. It's pretty not that obvious, but it works really good from Storm Call. So in the maps we are going to use Awakened Increase Area of Effect, and at the boss end we are going to use Concentrated Effect instead, to make sure we have as small AoE as possible. And it will pretty much overlap in the most cases. Just make sure that you are hitting the monster with at least 3 of the casts perfectly. If the boss is big enough, you will be able to get 5 overlaps for the maximum damage output. But even if 5 is not achievable at some bosses that are too small or moving too fast, you can still get at least 3 casts that way. It's also pretty important to mention a really good tag that will pretty much make skill much more comfortable to play. That's Impossible Escape to the Mage Bane. It will give us a chance to take Window of Opportunity passive together with 2 reduced skill effect duration around it. It will help us to just hit faster, because Storm Call got a little delayed damage and it can feel not that comfortable if you don't have it. So for the most cases, I really recommend to get the Impossible Escape for Mage Bane as fast as possible and get 3 points to Window of Opportunity and reduce skill duration around it. Build is playable without it, but with it, it will be much more comfortable, so I recommend to use it in the most cases. So talking about pros and cons for the build, I would say the biggest pros is Screen Wide AoE damage. You can pretty much cover the whole screen with explosions, like lightning explosions and Storm Calls. It's a really good thing and it feels really comfortable to play. It just feels fun. Lightning goes blur and it's a really good thingy. Moving forward, another pros would be really good overlap potential. It can help a lot with single target and it can bring you much more damage in some particular situations. With overlap potential comes good single target damage, which is very nice even in the mapping version, but in the bossing version with Concentrated Effect, when you can hit all the 5 overlaps, that would be completely amazing. Even if you can hit only 3 of them, it's still a pretty good number. Stack storms in place to burst would be another pros here, because it's really nice when you can stack damage before the enemy appear. It works really good for bossing and for some difficult situations when you can just stack the storms in place and just wait for the damage to be there. Like Harvest, for example, or Ritual, or places where monsters appear at a certain timer. And the build uses a lot of unique items too, which is pretty good for some people if if you don't really like to craft or you're not really impressed by high prices from good rares. Talking about cons, I would say the biggest con of the whole build is the damage delay. When you're casting your skill, there's a slight delay between the cast itself and the moment when the storm will hit the place. You will get used to it with time, but it still could be annoying for some people. Another con would be lightning damage over time effects such as a circle. It will kill your character almost immediately, even with petrified blood on. So you need to avoid them and to kill such kind of enemies from the distance. You also will need to swap gems and Flask for bosses, which is pretty alright in many builds, but it still can be annoying for some people, and you need to keep it in mind. So when you are going bossing, especially for Ubers, you will need to make a few swaps. And the last con here would be the idea that you still need to stay in the nearby range for the most tougher enemies, such as really tough rares, such as Uber bosses and stuff like that. So you can't just go away and off-screen them. It could be a little less comfortable than at other casters, but I think it feels pretty alright in the most cases because it's much easier to overlap when you are close. So talking about unique items, the most important item for the whole build is the Ryanis prototype. It pretty much gives us a chance to lower resistances of all nearby enemies and helps a lot with doing a lot of damage to rares, bosses and stuff like that. You don't really need against normal monsters because you just killing them too fast. But for any tougher targets, the Ryani prototype is pretty important. Another really important unique would be Relocation Patience. It's a pretty good item which gives us maximum number of endurance, frenzy and power charges. It also gives us increased movement speed and chaos resistance. All of that is pretty nice. On top of that, we're also using Crown of the Inverdai, which is pretty important too, but it can differ, and if you want to use a rare helmet, you can pretty much do that as well. Impossible Escape, Viridian Jewel, which should help a lot with quality of life, as I already mentioned, for window of opportunity and reduce skill duration. We're also using Melding of the Flesh, just to make sure we're lowering our resistances enough and making our highest resistance to apply to the second resistance like Fire and Cold together. So we're also using Thread of Hope, and in the high budget version we are using Ventor's Gamble, because it's a pretty nice item since it can lower one resistance and make two resistance higher, and it's pretty nice for the build. So based on all that, you can also use the Watcher's Eye for the Leech, for example, or you can roll it on different items. And in the high budget version, I think Mage Blood is a pretty good option as well. It's not necessary for medium budget or lower budget, but in the high budget version, you can pretty much go with it as well. Another pretty important thing is the Eyes of the Grateful Talisman for mapping. It gives us a chance to receive lightning damage from hits as fire damage, and this chance is 100%. That way we are receiving not a lot of lightning damage, because our fire resistance is pretty strong. If you're just receiving the lightning damage as physical damage, it will hit us pretty heavily, because we don't have a lot of physical damage reductions. But we have a lot of fire or cold ones. That way Eyes of the Great Wolf will rise our survivability and will make our elemental hits taken pretty much the same for all types of damage. So talking about the rare items, we don't have a lot of those. And the most important part for the rares is probably your weapons. We are going to use wands, and the most important stat of the wands is plus level to all spell skill gems and plus level to all lightning spell skill gems. That's pretty much the most important part that can boost your damage. You can also stack cast speed, spell damage, chance to double damage and stuff like that on top of your wand. But the most important part is plus level to spell skill gems and lightning spell skill gems. Even for the really low ones, like pretty simple ones, you still need to aim for at least +1 to some kind of gems, to get some levels to your Storm Call, since Storm Call receives a really good bonus from it. Moving forward to stuff like gloves, you don't really need anything in particular here, you just need some life and a lot of resistances to compensate, especially if you don't have a proper build. At the amulet you still aim for skill gems and lightning skill gems, pretty much in the same fashion as the weapons, for bossing. And for the mapping, you will need the unique amulet that we already discussed, Eyes of the Great Wolf, to make sure your survivability works good. As a ring, you can just use a simple chaos resistance ring with some cast speed and global critical strike multiplier on top. If you still need the resistances, you can try to roll some there as well. So, in the Ascendancy, it's pretty much very simple. First, you go for Arcane Blessing, and then you can go for Conviction of Power, and after that you can go for Divine Guidance, and finally for Sanctuary of Thought. Sanctuary of Thought pretty much will be pretty important keystone, since you will need it to get all your auras inside. It's a pretty nice thing, and it will help you to fit everything in. Especially since I'm trying to avoid using enlightenings higher than level 3 in the build itself. So talking about why Hierophant is a good ascendancy for it. There's like a few different options such as Inquisitor for example, or Assassin, or even Witch variation. But I currently think that Hierophant works pretty nice, mostly because of the Sanctuary of Thought. It's a pretty cool node which can give you 20% of maximum mana as extra maximum energy shield. That's really good since we are playing a hybrid build with a lot of energy shield together with life. It also gives us increased mana reservation efficiency, which really helps with auras itself, and less mana cost of skills, which is pretty important as well. That way we can just focus on the whole idea of stacking a lot of auras and getting more energy shield itself. We're also getting more mana from Divine Guidance, and Arcane Blessing is a pretty strong node as well. It gives us about 30% of damage with the Arcane Surge bonus, and I think it's worth the whole effort. We are also receiving one maximum power charge and one maximum endurance charge from Conviction of Power. It's not a big bonus, but it works pretty nice already. You could also get Illuminated Devotion if you want for more AoE for mapping, but to make my bossing damage consistent, I just decided to go for Conviction of Power instead. So overall Hierophant is a pretty balanced choice. It can give you more energy shield, it can give you more mana reservation efficiency of skills, and less mana cost of skills as well, which is pretty important to make sure we have mana cost of exactly 1. So talking about the Wildwood Ascendancy, the whole idea is pretty simple. We are getting for Primalist to just get access to charms, and the charms itself, we can roll a few different bonuses. Maximum fire or maximum cold resistance depends on what kind of purity you are using, is a pretty good bonus for your maximum resistance overall. You can also get Calling Strike from here pretty easily, which is nice. And after that you can get Consecrated Ground. You create applies 10% increased damage taken to enemies, since if you are using Zero 3, you will apply Consecrated Ground constantly to all the enemies. That pretty much means that we can stack such bonuses here and here for free damage. You can also go for Power Charge multiplier, Critical Strike multiplier for power charges, or for Critical Strike chance if you don't have enough. But in most cases, I think Consecrated Ground bonus, it works pretty stable and it usually costs a little less. Maximum mana as maximum energy shield on top is a pretty cool bonus as well. But any kind of damaging charms would work. Primalist is definitely the best ascendancy for that build and it should work pretty nice. So talking about R3, it's pretty alright as well. We're just going to the right side while taking both places for cluster jewels and auras here and there. We're also taking a lot of kind of paired nodes with increased maximum energy shield and increased maximum life. We're also taking a lot of damage in one there. and Pain Attunement cluster here to improve our Intensify as well. When you're checking pathway building, please make sure that you are checking all the possible versions like high budget, middle budget, and basic version, and you will need to change them simultaneously both in items, like skill stats, and in the tree. Also check nodes, because on the nodes I'm already creating some kind of tips that could help you to understand the build better and to make sure that you are getting the stuff that's pretty important for the whole approach. So talking about the gem setup, the whole process is pretty simple. In the main skill we are just stacking Storm Call together with Awakened Spell Cascade, Awakened Spell Echo, Awakened Increased Area of Effect for mapping or Concentrated Effect for bossing, Intensify Support and Inspiration. At the helmet we are stacking all our auras since we will get bonus socketed skill gems, get 90% cost and resurrection multiplier. That way we stack their Zeal 3, Wrath, Determination and Enlightening. Most of the time I try to avoid Enlightening level 4 since it costs a lot that league, so I'm mostly focused on Enlightening level 3, we still can get enough of mana. In the boots we are getting Arrogance, Enlightening again, like only level 3, together with Petrified Blood and Vitality. I pretty much using Vitality just in combination with Watcher's Eye to just make sure we are receiving some Life Leech. If you want to just buff your gloves instead, you can drop Vitality altogether. So in the gloves we are receiving Inspiration, Arcanist Brand and Assassin's Mark, together with a Flame Dash. It's pretty important to get Inspiration there to just make sure your skills don't really cost too much mana, because we have only 4 mana available. At the wand I'm using Purity of Fire, Enlighten again like just level 3, and Discipline, which should give us a lot of additional energy shield and can help a lot. And at the second one I'm using Inspiration, Cast 1 Damage Taken and Molten Shell, just to make sure we are receiving Molten Shell as often as possible. So the overall gem setup should be pretty simple, just keep your auras in your helmet, and don't forget to use Arrogance together with Petrified Blood. So talking about the whole mana situation, since we are using Inspiration, it is pretty important to keep our mana cost at 1. In the high budget version, if you are using Mage Blood or anything like that, which can lower your mana consumption, you can encounter the issue that your mana cost will become 0. It's not good since with 0 mana cost you can't get Inspiration stacks. So for that you need to recraft your ring. Just craft less minus mana for non-challenging skills. Not like 6 or 7, just go for 5 or even 4 in some cases, to make sure your mana cost is always 1. So talking about the mana in the middle budget, you just need to get as much non-challenging skills have minus total mana cost as possible, because you don't have way to lower your mana with flasks. That way you can craft it on both rings, and unfortunately you can't use Ventor's Gamble properly. So just go for 2 rare rings with non-challenging skills have minus mana cost, and it will work pretty good. So talking about the unique jewels, we have a few pretty important options. One of them should be Impossible Escape and Melding of the Flesh. Melding of the Flesh gives us minus all elemental resistance, which is pretty important. And we're also losing some maximum elemental resistances, but we will get more maximum elemental resistances from Purity of Fire or Purity of Cold. Any of it will work properly. That way we can get a lot of bonuses and bonus damage based on minus resistance overall. We're also getting Impossible Escape for Mage Bane right here to take window of opportunity, reduce skill duration or reduce skill duration. It's a pretty important combination because it gives us a lot of quality of life. Just make sure to get it as fast as possible. And if you can, the build is still playable, but it will feel just not that smooth. We're also using Thread of Hope right here, mostly to get Assassination, Blood Siphon and Mark the Prey. It works pretty good overall on this, and we can just go around taking all the damage nodes that we need. We're also receiving minus resistances from Thread of Hope as well. It gives us about 7.5% of damage, which is pretty nice, and you can roll some bonus on top as well, since Thread of Hopes are usually not that expensive, especially later on. Talking about cluster jewels, we have a few different options right here, but overall it should be pretty basic. We will need 2 cluster jewels, mostly there and there. So what should be on the cluster jewel itself? Most of the time we need to aim for lightning damage or spell damage one, with increased attack and cast speed with lightning skills together with chaos resistance, and added small passives have 35 increased effect. It works pretty good. You can add 2% increased damage on top, but it's not that amazingly important because it's not really gives a lot. Every node gives us about 3% of the whole damage and 5% chaos resistance, which is completely amazing. We are stacking 2 of them, and that way we can stack our damage pretty nice. Even if we don't have the 2% damage bonus, as you can see on that one, we don't have it. We are losing only 0.1% of damage, so it's not that important. Just aim for chaos resistance, add a cast speed with lightning skills, and lightning damage itself, or spell damage. Added small passives have 35% increased effect on top, will be just a nice addition. So for mapping and bossing changes, it is pretty simple. Exactly in the same fashion as with many other builds, we are getting increased area of effect and perfectly aweight increased area of effect for mapping. It helps us to cover the screen with beautiful AoE, and it looks just good. And at the bossing, we're just dropping it, and instead we're taking concentrated effect to make sure our area of effect as small as possible, and our hits can pretty much overlap even at the small bosses. It also gives much more damage and should be really comfortable to boss with. We're also changing the flasks, since for bosses we really need bottled faith. You also will need to change the amulet to the Eyes of the Great Wolf to make sure that lightning damage is not really hitting you too hard in mapping. On bosses you pretty much can just focus on dealing damage and go with a rare amulet. But when you are mapping, the survivability comes first because you don't really need to die in the most cases, so you just need to use Eyes of the Great Wolf there to make sure you're not receiving too much lightning damage. That's pretty much it, and you don't need to change anything else, because everything else will pretty much just work as it is. So the Pantheon for the build is pretty simple. They are going for the Brine King to get frozen immunity, together with the reduced effect of chill, which is pretty nice. And they are taking Soul of Relakesh to make sure they are not receiving damage while bleeding and moving, and they are receiving less physical damage over time while they are moving as well. It also can help with Corrupted Blood, but you could get immunity from Corrupted Implicits on your jewels, so take it only if you need that.
What secrets are you hiding in that murderous mind of yours? Valdo had some ingenious designs hidden in his memory. Observe! Darkness Valdo's designs were flawed. Do you remember dying here? You will. What are you? In this, the realm of the past, I am king, and you will bow. This one is my own creation. Rayclass needs me! Plenty more where that came from. Face your destruction. No! Impossible! How? This isn't over. This will never be over. I will.
So that was my Storm Call Hierophant build. It could be pretty fun to play because of the huge AoE, and it can be a pretty strong booster as well. I think it's a really nice build for the second part of the league, and it should be really cool to play that. Thank you very much for watching, please like and subscribe for more Path of Exile content, and see you all next time.